I'm Mike Uyak. I love to try new things, and I've had culinary adventures all around the world, as well as right at home. I've had really wonderful food, as well as some really horrible food. I'd like to share some of my adventures with you, and we'll see if I have what it takes to fix whatever goes wrong. This is Recipe Redemption. Greetings and salutations, everyone, and welcome to this episode of Recipe Redemption. Now, with this whole quarantine stay-at-home order in effect here in the state of Washington, I've had a lot of time to peruse the internet, and I ran across a photo which qualifies this for WTF Theater for tomato cheesecake. And the concept seems strange to me, but upon further investigation, it turns out there are actually recipes for this out there. So it's not entirely an unknown thing, but it was unknown to me. So I'm going to say it qualifies for WTF Theater. And while I was in the process, I also ran across an idea that someone had for a Philly cheesesteak cheesecake. I always have to make sure I got that right. Yes, I got that in the right order. So I thought, as a fun little challenge, can I make these two recipes work without following any sort of recipe ahead of time that I've read ahead of time? Is my knowledge of cooking good enough to take just the concept of a dish and actually create the dish? Since there are already recipes that exist, I know that these supposedly work, but can I make them work? So let's find out. I'm going to start my crust with some Ritz crackers, and I'm just going to use this meat tenderizer. I don't really have a mortar and pestle or anything like that, so and this is a glass bowl, so I'm not going to go smashing down with this thing. I'm just going to use it like a mortar and pestle and crumble these into crumbs. And I'm going to add about a quarter cup of melted butter that stirred around. I'm just going to basically kind of like a graham cracker or an Oreo crust, but with crackers. In retrospect, this is probably not enough butter, but we'll see. Just going to pour these. I have these little tart tins. Now for cheesecake, usually you use a springform pan. I don't have one of those, and I'm also trying to make smaller quantities of these, since if I screw it up, I don't want a whole lot of it. So I'm going to use these little tart pans. I think they're about 5 inches in diameter, and I'm just going to press my cracker crust down into it, like so. Also try to press that kind of up against the sides. That'll hopefully help this unmold once it's all done. I put it in an oven for about 20 minutes at 350 degrees just to kind of toast those off and hopefully set. In the meantime, I'm going to make my tomato jam. This is just a can of tomatoes. I've drained most of the liquid off of it and put it over a medium heat. And I'm adding about a quarter cup of sugar, some onion powder, garlic powder, some cinnamon, allspice, and a little bit of cayenne pepper, just so they know who they're messing with. Stir that in, bring that up to a simmer, and then I'm going to lower the heat and let that reduce down. While that's reducing, in the bowl of my mixer, I'm going to add 2 packages of cream cheese along with the reserved tomato juice, 2 eggs, and I'm adding about a quarter cup of whipping cream to this, and then beating until it's smooth. This will take a few minutes. If you are doing this concurrently with making the tomato jam, be sure to check in on your tomato jam every now and then, give it a stir. And I'm going to season my cheesecake filling and whip that until it's pretty smooth. Since I made enough crust for 3 of those little tart tins, and because I'm actually serving this for dinner, I'm splitting the filling into basically 2/3 in that bowl and 1/3 reserved to the side. And for this, I'm going to make this into the Philly cheesesteak cheesecake filling. So I'm going to add some garlic powder and onion powder, and I'm going to add a little turmeric to this. I don't really have anything to make this sort of Velveeta-ish or Cheese Whiz-ish, so I'm going to substitute by just adding a little turmeric to give it a little bit of that yellow color, give it a hint of being kind of like Cheese Whiz for the Philly cheesesteak. Now in the other one, I'm adding a bunch of basil, because basil goes with the tomato jam really well. And I'm just going to stir that to combine and make sure that's distributed evenly. Once that's done, nothing to do but fill the tarts. Here is my tomato cheesecake with basil, and just enough to fill the little tart and spread it out. And this is the first indication that my cracker crust is not going to hold together, because it's not, well, holding together. But hopefully the cheesecake filling will also help to hold it together. And here is the tomato jam. I'm just going to spoon over the top. See how thick that's already become. That's really nice. And now for my Philly cheesesteak cheesecakes. Just going to fill those up too. I'm going to bake these plain rather than put any toppings on top of it, because I don't want the beef to overcook. So I'm just going to bake these separately. I'm going to place this in a 300-degree oven for 40 minutes until the filling is set. While those are baking, I need to cook up the topping for my Philly cheesesteak cheesecake. First up, onions. I just happen to have some red onion around, so that's what I did, and I just cut them into thin strips and saute them here. And I want to get a nice caramelization on them, so about a medium heat, and give it a little time. Next up, green peppers. Again, also sliced thin, and saute just till they start to brown. And finally, the beef, which I have marinated in a combination of soy sauce. It's not really traditional, but I do it. Soy sauce, Worcestershire sauce, a little bit of liquid smoke, and some red wine. And now the moment of truth. Now, the bottom comes out of these tart tins. Oh dear. Can I get it out without losing most of the crust? And then getting the little circular bottom off the bottom, and it doesn't want to come loose, so maybe I can sort of push it off to the side. And the answer is sort of. That's disappointing. And here comes my tomato cheesecake. Same deal. And still doesn't want to come up. Well, it sort of did, but it's a lot of crackers. And since I'm splitting this between me and Chris, I am going to try and cut the tomato cheesecake in half. And lose even more crackers. So that needs to go back to the drawing board. But the question is, how does it taste? Oh wait, let's not forget about the Philly cheesesteak. So layer the onions, and the green peppers on top. There they are. And finally, lest we forget the steak on our Philly cheesesteak cheesecake, layer on the steak. A good healthy dollop. Might be nice if you actually got some of it on the cheesecake. That'd be great. execution wise, not perfect. I think I probably should have put the Ritz crackers into a food processor and actually powdered them. The smaller particle size would allow them to adhere together better as a crust and hopefully stay together better. Obviously, a cheesecake is typically made in a springform pan for a reason, because it actually comes away from the sides of the cheesecake. And you don't get that sort of adhesion that I got. That being said, the crust obviously would take a little bit of improvement, but the flavor and texture of the cheesecake, the filling itself and the toppings, actually came out quite well. I'm not going to bother. I didn't bother to actually film myself eating them in front of you. I'll spare you that. It wasn't pretty. Because the crust didn't hold together. It was just distributing crumbs everywhere. I'm probably going to continue finding them for the next couple of days. They were going everywhere, well beyond the confines of the dinner table. So, crust not great. Established. But the flavor was great. The tomato jam could have actually been sweeter. I was surprised. I thought that I only needed to add a little bit of sugar just to counteract the acids that were going to get concentrated in the process of making the tomato jam. But I think it could have actually benefited from being just a little bit sweeter. The actual cream cheese custard cheesecake filling turned out quite well. The basil was quite tasty. Although there was definitely an eggy sort of element to it, it sort of reminded me of the spreadable cheeses that you get in the little crocks. I think Alouette is one of the brands that I'm familiar with. That's just like an herb cream cheese spread that kind of reminds me of it. But it's no surprise, since it is herb cream cheese. It just happens to have a little extra dairy and eggs added to it. But it wasn't as custardy as I was expecting it to be. But that's fine. Cheesecake is cheesecake. As far as the Philly cheesecake, I probably could have actually gone further in the direction as far as the cheesecake filling, of making it, perhaps incorporating grated Velveeta or something into it to make it more like the sort of cheese whiz that you sort of expect with a Philly cheesesteak, but it's fine. It had that sort of creamy, cheesy flavor and texture to it. Didn't go quite as far in the direction of Cheese Whiz as I could have, but in a way, using Philadelphia cream cheese on a Philly cheesecake, it sort of the juxtaposition there is actually kind of nice. And who doesn't like grilled beef with onions and peppers? So the flavor of that, I probably could have sliced the beef a little thinner. Came out in larger chunks, which were a little more unwieldy for this small little tart that I had. But otherwise, the flavors were actually really, really good. I think I may actually be making this again in the future. But at any rate, I managed it. Let me know what you think about how I did. And if you'd like the recipe, let me know. I'll try to recreate it in my head and write it down for you. But again, I encourage you to continue experimenting. If you're stuck at home anyway, cook something and let me know how it goes. So until next time, I'm Mike Uyak here for Recipe Redemption. Thanks for watching.